Guys, right now we are at the Cape Coast Castle, and this castle were built by the European traders to serve as the trading post of the European nations and as the headquarters of the British colonial administration of the Gold Coast colony. So as we arrive here, they give us a guide who will be taking us around this place to educate us about this place and us to tell us what happened here years ago. So many things happens to our ancestors here. So we are here to tell you the history, what happened years ago here in the Cape Coast Castle. So follow me, let's go inside. We'll go to the male dungeon where the male captive Africans were kept before they were sent to Europe. After that, we'll go to the female dungeon too. Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you, my brother.
What is your name?
My name is Tony Boidi, and I'm a tour guide here.
Oh, people out there will need to know the story, the history about this place. So that's why I'm here.
Okay, that's a very good job. Really appreciate you coming in here to show the world what happened in Cape Coast Castle.
Yes.
And Cape Coast Castle is actually one of the 3 slave castles Europeans built in Ghana. And the 3 slave castles are Elmina Castle, Osu Castle, and Cape Coast Castle. Elmina Castle is also known as the St. George's Castle. The Portuguese built Elmina Castle in 1482. So that makes it the oldest slave castle in West Africa. Osu Castle is also known as the Christianborg Castle. The Danish built that one in 1661. And this is Cape Coast Castle. Cape Coast Castle was established by the British in 1664. So that makes Cape Coast Castle the youngest slave castle. But Cape Coast Castle is 357 years old. Oh, it is 358 years old this year. It was 357 years old. It is 358 this year. But this castle was built by the British specifically for the transatlantic slave trade. So they built this castle in the name of enslaving the Africans. The British also built dungeons. There are dungeons here. In the male dungeon were as many as 1,000 men. In the female dungeon were as many as 500 women. The conditions in the dungeons were very horrible. Did you see the condition when we back there? It was in the dungeon that the African men would eat and sleep and ease themselves. Poorly ventilated dungeons. And what is very shocking is that there's a tunnel that begins in the middle dungeon to the door of no return. So the African men were not actually allowed to walk through this courtyard to the door of no return. They were all urged through the tunnel to the door of no return. I would like to tell viewers, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen out there that if you can make it to Cape Coast Castle, just come here. This would be a life-changing experience. Come and see where your ancestors were taken from to the Americas and to the Caribbean islands. Thank you very much for your time, my brother. I really appreciate it. And
so after here, you'll be taking us to the male dungeons. After that, we'll go to the female dungeons and other places around this castle.
Okay.
So let's, guys, this is the male slave dungeon, and it is where the male captive Africans were kept before they were sent to Europe. So we will go inside to see what is inside, how they went through the struggling, how these people treated them. We'll go inside for you to see. So let's go. So guys, we are going inside the male slave dungeon, and we'll show you and we'll tell you what's really happened there.
The male dungeon, and there's a place called the female dungeon. But the male dungeon comprises of 5 chambers. That's the first chamber. We are in the second chamber. That's the 3rd, 4th, and 5th chamber. In each one of them, the maximum number was 200 men. So 200 men, 200, 200, 200, 200. So it was actually 1,000 men here in the male dungeon. Now the only source of light and air for 200 men here was that hole there. Can you see them? Can you see it? The conditions here were very bad. There was a wide spread of diseases such as malaria, cholera, diarrhea, cancer, yellow fever. What is very shocking is that on top of this mill dungeon, the British built a church. The name of the church is Society for the Propagation of the Gospel. And Society for the Propagation of the Gospel is an Anglican church, the Church of England. Now, on this very site, though the British established this castle, but the first Europeans to come here were the Portuguese. But when the Portuguese came here, they didn't build the castle, they built a wooden structure we call Cabo Castle. But the Portuguese left, and many years after, the Swedish came here and built a fort made of these types of bricks and rocks. We call that fort Carolosborg. But the Swedish were defeated by the Danish, and the Danish were also conquered by the Dutch. It was finally in 1664 that the British took over the castle and they took over the fort and started developing the fort into a castle. That is why we normally give credit to the British that they built Cape Coast Castle in 1664. Ladies and gentlemen, how did 1,000 men get in here? And how did 500 women get in female dungeon? That part of the history is very important.
That's inside the male slave dungeon. You see, there is even a light. That's why you are seeing it this way. The thing is darker and darker as you cannot imagine. Very dark. You see, even there is a light too. There is a light. Look at how the place is dark. And during the time that the slaves were inside, they were not any source of light. They were not any source of light. And they stayed here for months, several days that they stayed inside without any source of light. And the doors were closed. Even there is a light today and the door is open. And still, look at how the place is. You see the small hole over there? That was the only source of light for them, where they get their fresh air. That's the only hole they created for them. So you can imagine. Look, unless you, I don't know how to explain these things so that you get me. Unless you come here yourself to experience this. You know, it's not easy, man. Unless you come here, I don't even know. My camera cannot do justice to me, you know.
Over here. But can you see that small prison there? No, yeah. that cell was a sick cell. You know, many African men got blind, sick, and very weak. So that is where the British soldiers would put them to die. And after they died, they would just take their dead bodies and trash them in the ocean. But before what you are standing is this is not a British structure. This is an African. This is part of what we call the West African traditional spirituality. There are 77 of these altars or shrines in Cape Coast. It is part of their traditions. But this very one is the leader altar. The name of the altar is Nana Tabra. There's a priest, a traditional priest in charge of this. His name is Nana Kwame Nkra. But Nkra, this shrine used to be here on this very location before the construction of the castle began. But when the Europeans came, the local people relocated to a different place. It was after slave trade was abolished that they decided to bring it back here. But there used to be a big tunnel, a very big tunnel right here. All the men in the mill dungeon were chained and shackled and forced through the tunnel to the door we call the door of no return. But this tunnel got blocked off in 1834 to officially mark the abolition. But I want you to remember there was a tunnel here. These are wreaths that were brought by different visitors in order to pay respect to the ancestors who died in the dungeons. But I'd like you to take a look. Just take a look there and let's continue, please.
This castle, how many years did it take them to?
A period of over 300 years.
About 300 years.
Yes, over 300
Over
years.
300
The
years.
castle was built in stages. Oyster shells where the materials were oyster shells. You can see them breaks, the rocks. Some of the oyster shells they had to burn them. Burnt oyster shells. Yeah. But the priest is not around. He didn't come today. The traditional priest didn't come today. I would have allowed him to do some demonstration for you to see how it's been done in the West African traditional religion or spirituality. I think he's traveled. But the castle is a very big place. Let's go. Let me show you. I need to show you. There's more to be seen. There's more you need to see. Please. So this one, look. This is the female punishment cell. There are 2 female dungeons. These are the female dungeons. And that's the door I made mention of, the door of no return. Now the maximum number was 250. The minimum was 150. So the number in each was between 150 to 250 women at a time. So it was 300 to 500. The British soldiers will go there, they'll bring the women out, they'll rape them. But some women resisted rape. This is what they put them. There was a door here, they locked them up. No, they just put them there. It depended on the aggressiveness of the woman. If they realized that the women were too much to be handled, they'll just shackle you and put you there. But there was a door here, they locked them up. Did you get to see a window like this in the male on themselves? So the women, their punishment was more of a psychological warfare. They didn't want to kill them. So they gave them food and water. But it was the amount of food and water that was given to them that was reduced. So for them, it wasn't to kill them, it was to punish them for some days. The numbers depended on the numbers that resisted. So for them, they would just punish them and take them back to the female dungeon. The number of food and water that was given to them was reduced. But for the women, again, the reason why the British didn't want to kill them as they killed the African men in the male condemned cell was because they knew they could reproduce after they took them, after they shipped them off. They could multiply the number, they could get pregnant and multiply. So they didn't kill them as they killed the African men. This was for punishment, and we just take them back to the female dungeons. But as a whole, the whole is where the women were easing themselves.
So, meaning they give them food through
Yeah, but they reduced the amount of food and water that was given to them through this. If they were giving them 2 times daily, they'll reduce it to 1 time a day. But over here, the governor had to come here to pick the women out there, to clean them and rape them. Because of that, many women got pregnant. All those who got pregnant were taken outside. There was a British community. There were wooden structures where the African women were taken to. They gave them clothing items, shelter, water, food, and everything. But the children to whom the African women gave it to were not dark like this. They were light-skinned. Some called them mulattoes and mulattresses. Remember, they were not victims. They were not slaves. They were not brought here. No. Back in the male dungeon, I made mention of a church. In the 1760s, that church was used also as a school. So some of the light-skinned children, or the light-skinned children were actually taken there to be educated. It wasn't education, technically. It was indoctrination. So the light-skinned children, because of the treatment that was given to them, many of them felt superior to their dark-skinned brothers and sisters. The most painful aspect is that many African women, after many mountain years, were brought back to these dungeons for shipment to begin to the Americas. And the British normally refer to the African women as wenches, and that means a prostitute. Now, before what you are standing is the infamous door of no return. The original door of no return was not as huge as this. It was very narrow, very small, very tiny, right here. We call this door the door of no return because this is where the Africans in the dungeons made their last exit. The moment they were through this door, that was the end. They were all forced onto the slave ships. But the slave ships were very far away from here. They anchored them very far away from here. However, the British would bring smaller boats closer to the castle, force the Africans onto and transfer them to the bigger slave ships for shipment to begin to the Americas. We call the journey the Middle Passage. It took them 3 to 4 months before they got there. From here, they were taken to places like the Caribbean islands and to the Americas. But during the slave trade, the British had only 13 colonies in what is known today as the United States of America. It is estimated that over 4 million West Africans were shipped off from Cape Coast Castle alone. It is estimated that over 40% of the total population of the West Africans were shipped off as victims, were shipped off by the Portuguese. The Portuguese normally transported the Africans to Brazil. That is why Brazil has a very large population of African people. Today we are going to walk through a door. Millions of the victims who were held in the dungeons were taken through and never came back to Africa. Please come and see. This was the exit. So the British came out like this. But this beach right behind us is known as Ablofumpuano in our language. Ablofumpuano means white man's beach or European beach because black people were not allowed to fish or swim here. Every boat you see right now are recent boats which belong to the fishermen. Over 85% of the population here in this community are into fishing. This is what they do for a living. But I want you to have a look there. Can you see the door of return? Now this door is not British. It's not European. It was established by the Global African Family in 1998 during a historical festival we call Emancipation. And emancipation is when we come together as black people, as African people, as descendants of the victims to commemorate the abolition. And in 1998, there were skeletons of two people. We call them Samuel Carson and Madame Crystal. Samuel Carson is from New York, Madame Crystal is from Jamaica. Their skeletons were exhumed from their graves and brought to Accra in order to represent the Africans in the diaspora. After their skeletons were brought to Accra, they transferred them to a place called Abanzi. From Abanzi, they brought them across the ocean through the door of return. This is to urge, it is to encourage all the Africans in the diaspora to come back to their roots. So the purpose of this door is to bridge the gap between the Africans in the diaspora and those in the African continent. After the skeletons of Samuel Carson and Madame Crystal were brought through this door of return, they reburied them at a place called the Asin Manson Slave River site. And that is where the Africans were brought here, took their last bath. You know, those from Mali, Burkina Faso, the northern regions took their last bath. They brought them here, the dungeons, for shipment to begin to the Americas.